We start by thanking Shri Chavan, he's not in the room right now, Jairaj, a longtime friend, and all the faculty of the All-Indian Institute of Local Self-Government for inviting me to this very important summit. This is not the first time I'm attending the Institute summits. I've attended them in the past as well. But this one assumes particular significance as it's the first one after COVID-19. And I think we have many more challenges now than we had when the last one was held in Goa. My panel, very esteemed panel, is right here. And we did try to sort of get in touch with each other a few days back, just 2 or 3 years back, just to see if we can coordinate our presentations in advance. That did not take off. I think we just couldn't reach out to all of the panelists. But what I have been doing over the past 2-3 days is to simply look at what is happening in Asia with respect to urbanization, especially the work that Omar, right here from ESCAP, he and his colleagues have been doing at ESCAP, looking at the 3 reports that ESCAP has produced in the past decades, 2010, 2015, and 2019, and also the first report that was done by ESCAP in 1993. And I've also been comparing the 2019 report with the 2022 report of the UN Habitat on the world cities. And some very interesting conclusions came as far as Asia is concerned. And I'm going to share just in bullet points, some of the conclusions that emerged from the reports that ESCAP and the UN Habitat have done, specifically on Asia. The first message that comes out of the UN Habitat report is extremely important and very profound conclusion, which is that cities need to be prepared to deal with unpredictable futures. That's something that we have not done. The unpredictable future is something that cities need to begin work on now, because it is becoming increasingly difficult to see where the future lies and what the future might unfold itself in the decades or in the years to come. And I think the reference was really that no one anticipated that COVID will take place. No one anticipated that in this part of the world, in this year, the countries will go to fight. Nobody anticipated that there was inflation, the high interest rate in the US will cripple the countries which are affecting cities more than any other indicator anywhere in the world. So the first conclusion that was really coming out of the UN Habitat report was that cities ought to be preparing themselves to deal with unpredictable futures. The second point that I wish to make is that Asian urbanization is important for the global economy. It is not just Asia, for that Asia is important, but Asia's urbanization is important to the global economy for the simple reason that, number one, it accounts for roughly about 50% of the global urban population. I'm excluding Central Asia and the West Asia. My focus is essentially on South Asia and Southeast Asia, which account for 49% of the world's urban population, but only about 35% of the global GDP. And that is where Asia is lagging behind possibly the other regions, and we need to be making our cities much more productive than what we have done so far. This is the second point that I wish to make. The third point that is very, very important is the urban demographics in Asia is changing very rapidly. compared to the kind of demographics that Asia has faced, let's say 3 decades back or the 4 decades back, those conditions have changed completely. Number in 3 ways in particular. One, that cities are expanding outwards. The distinction between rural and urban is becoming thinner and thinner year after year. So much so that the UN Statistical Commission had just come out with a report saying that this kind of a division that the UN has been making, urban and rural, now we should begin to look at in 3 parts. That is urban, cities, the second part being the towns and dense areas, and the third part being the rural areas of the villages. So the whole context as far as urban spread is taking place in Asian economies, I think we need to change. This is one factor that we need to take into account. The second thing that we had not anticipated was that there would be cities with 20 million people, 25 million people, 30 million people. No one really had anticipated cities of that scale, but now they're increasingly, we are getting both the numbers and the shares of population in the metropolitan part increasing very, very rapidly. I recall Janice Perlman saying that world does not have experience of dealing with cities of this scale. We do not know how to bring food into the city of 30 million people or 35 million people. We do not know how to collect this waste that is disposed of and all the other challenges that cities of those scales really produce worldwide. And the third urban demographics component, which is beginning to engage our attention, is that there's both aging in some of the countries that we know. We know Japan and we know China, South Korea. They're already aging, and many other countries have the demographic dividend. In India, let me give you the example. Very interesting it is, some of the more advanced states, some of those states which are more urbanized and where the per capita incomes are higher, they are now beginning to age. Like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, they're beginning to age now. And one really has to wonder as to how these states, which have been in the front runner in the economic growth of the country, how will the productivity of those states will be maintained, particularly in light of the changes that are taking place. And the other part is really the demographic dividend, which once again in the case of India, is the characteristics of states such as Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Odisha, which are relatively backward, which are not urbanized, and which are not growing at rates that they ought to. So where the need for the demand for jobs is much greater, these are really the backward states, and where the productivity is much higher, they're beginning to age. Now we begin to see these kinds of challenges which need to be looked at when we look at the city's growth. The third point that I want to make is that I do not know how many of you would have seen the first paper of the World Bank in 1990s, which really said cities are really meant for economic growth. They're meant for, have to be competitive, and they have to be bankable. These were the 3 main goals which the first paper of the World Bank in 1990s had emphasized. Now, from those 3 goals, we have moved on that our cities need to be sustainable, they need to be resilient, and they need to be inclusive. So this change from growth, competitiveness, and bankable to moving on to sustainability, resilience, this really makes a huge departure from the way in which we have been dealing with our cities. And the models of efficiency that we try to use in most of the countries, they now have to be adjusted to meet the demands of a equity-based, sustainable-based, or sustainable-led kind of a growth. The fourth point that I want to bring in is the whole issue of governance, to which much emphasis has come to be placed in recent years, not just in India, but throughout Asia. Now, historically, governance and finance have been part of the public sector engagement. That public policies, public management of services, local services delivery, and likewise local financing of services that have been the key factor in most of the countries. From there, the change which is coming about, and we are still not getting used to it, is that the neoliberal models of governance, where the non-state actors should play a much bigger role than what they have done in the past, that is now beginning to be talked about, that is beginning to be discussed, and we still do not understand how long will it take us to the neoliberal models where the private sector, the non-state sectors, and community participation will either replace or supplement the public sector agencies. Similarly, the public finance, local government finance, it has always been funded and monitored and managed by local governments with transfers or without transfers. And I think Omar will talk about it because the 2019 report especially mentioned about it. Now, from public finance, we are asking that it is market finance that ought to be funding local services. And that kind of a change is, whether it's through the municipal bonds, or whether it's through debentures, or whether it is through mortgages, we are still trying to adjust as to what really it means to change from public financing to private financing of local services. We do know that in the US, the bond market alone is $4 trillion right now, and even in China, it is $3 trillion, which is more or less equal to India's GDP, but that is the local government debt in China at this point in time. It may have created problems in China, but certainly that is the kind of scale that we are speaking about. So these are some of the points that I picked out in the reports, and I thought I'll mention them in the first session being that what are really the pathways and what are really the challenges that we need to be working on. With this, I will call upon Neeraj. Neeraj is Principal Secretary, Urban Development with the government of Madhya Pradesh. We have known each other from the time he was with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and I'm sure that he will bring, he is delivering a keynote address. I'm sure you would give him a clap before he come and take the stage. Neeraj.
He can move the presentation. Thank you, Hopi sir. It's been a pleasure and honor to be part of this panel and in front of this esteemed house. I welcome all the urban practitioners here, the honorable mayors who are participating today. And the morning session, although the minister said it was not technical, but I think it was very fruitful, and it did speak and bring out, like an inaugural session should, all the urban issues which are facing us. This session, as Mathur sir has said, we are talking about collective urban response to an evolving crisis. What are the evolving crises in this sphere? There are some short-term and some long-term. Next slide, please. Also, in my limited 10 minutes, I would be highlighting on the efforts and achievements of my state. For my foreign delegates and participants, India is a federal country which has a union government and states. I belong to the central part of a country which is called Madhya Pradesh, which is by and large the largest area in the country. We have about 70 million population, out of which 2 million is urban. Our urban areas are divided into 3 categories: large, medium and small. The large towns are called municipal corporations and the others are smaller in nature. So in India we have rural areas and urban areas, and the urban evolving crisis when I thought about this topic, I thought there are some short-term crises and there are some long-term. Against our common thought, the short-term crises are very well attended because they are handled by all agencies together in a city, in a state. The government comes in, the police comes in, the experts come in, the NGOs, the social, the finance, all together come in for short-term crises. And they are by and large handled in a reasonably okay fashion. May it be a pandemic, natural disaster, or a civic unrest, or an urban flooding sort of issue. But the long-term crises are all left to the city, which is actually, as Kunal, the Joint Secretary, mentioned in the morning, leads to a huge capacity crisis. The long-term crisis which we can talk about are urban planning, the environmental challenges, the transport issues, and likes. Really speaking, in India and in so many other cities, these issues are left to the city to handle, or the parastatals, or the organizations dealing with these particular sectors. And that's how the crisis starts brewing up. And in larger terms, in 10 years, 15 years, or in the Amrit Kal vision, these things are now which have to be addressed to correct our roadmap. Again, in the short slot available, I would be speaking on the environmental issues by and large, because it is impossible to cover in any meaningful way a large sector of the crisis. And in the crisis, I would not go into any genesis or the reasons, because it's a learned and intelligent audience. I would like to share how Madhya Pradesh and our cities have tried to address some of these crises which has come in front of them. The environmental crisis a city typically faces are in the pollution side, in the solid and liquid waste management, in the carbon footprint in any activity they do, and of course to maintain the green cover of the city. The air pollution part is well known and every Indian city is facing it. The growing air pollution is a big problem. Delhi is in national news for not good reasons on this ground, but other cities are also not doing well. And by and large, we have accepted that the rural areas would be cleaner and the urban areas would be polluted, which is not true. We have to change our mindset that we can have a cleaner and greener urban conglomeration where we have the proper inputs and policies which contribute to maintaining and preserving the environment. What we have done in our city and state is, in terms of mobility, if we speak physically as an example, in the vehicle sector, we have phased out all 15-year-old commercial diesel vehicles. That's a big step in terms of looking at the resources of the cities, looking at the resources, economy of the city, but it's a policy decision which will be done in a phased manner. Green fuel and electric vehicle, which sound so futuristic as of now, are in place, and a large number of them are plying between our cities, within our cities as a means of public transport. The issue of regulation of pollution has also been enforced in a very strong way by the pollution certificates and the checking the emission levels. And the policies on e-vehicles, e-rickshaws and parking are all progressive and looking towards reducing the carbon footprint, as well as by looking at the air quality index aspect of a city. Another pollutant for the city is the construction. On one hand, we keep on saying that the capital investment brings prosperity. That is the key to economic growth. And each year, we focus on capital investment, capex growth. But a capital project would entail construction, and construction in turn entail huge pollution if not done properly. We have taken care of such issues in our city, and along with the mandate of the Swachh Bharat mission, the cleanliness of construction site, the construction and demolition waste yards, and a lot of activities which are mandated in the National Building Code are being very strictly implemented in order to cut down the pollution due to construction. Similarly, cities also do have industrial areas. Cities do have some industries and economic activities in terms of manufacturing. That is taken care of by multiple actions which look at the air pollution. We have classified them as white industries, as green industries, as orange industries, and then the normal blue and red industries. And many activities have stringent norms that if they want to function within the city limits, these commercial and economic activities must comply with these emission, pollution, sound and air pollution norms. When we talk about solid waste management, that in a way is Madhya Pradesh's crowning glory. Honorable Prime Minister launched Swachh Bharat mission in 2014, and since then the country has not looked back. It was not on the agenda, and the 5 P's which Honorable Minister mentioned initially, all of them were taken in the right earnest in Madhya Pradesh, be it the waste collection in a scientific manner. We are proud to say that we have 100% segregation, transportation, collection and scientific treatment of entire solid waste right up to the last kilogram in our cities. Either by a cluster approach if they are smaller cities, or the larger cities like Indore, Bhopal and Jabalpur are doing it as their standalone projects. They have been evaluated by scientific agencies, by academicians, by experts, and all of them have certified that the model is working, is efficient, is environmental friendly and is sustainable. Recently we have started a big drive to clear all these sites of dump yards in our state. The cluster approach and the use of waste either for treatment in terms of material recovery, waste to compost, all of these models are working in Madhya Pradesh in our all 413 cities, and that actually has been extremely successful in bringing down so many indices which correlate to health and sanitation and in terms of maternal mortality and child mortality. Bhopal alone, for example, which is the capital of our state, cleared a piece of its dump yard, and by way generating a huge amount of 85 crores through the remediation of land and clearance of the site, which has increased in value all around it. The water and solid waste both work hand in hand together. If we look at the solid waste management and ignore the grey water and the liquid, either waste management or water management as such, then the story is incomplete. So when Indore became the cleanest city of the country and still holds the title in the 6th running year, it also looked at managing its water. And there was a model in the Water Plus certification. The country launched, the ministry launched, and then looking at the entire consumption pattern, the conservation, the recycle, the circularity in the use of water, and all of these sectors, looking at it, certifying it, scientifically measuring it, and then proving the usage. The water sector is now our priority in the state. After successfully completing the solid waste interventions, the water sector becomes a focus because we are a landlocked state with a few perennial rivers in our state. Carbon credits and carbon footprint has been a side gain. Our Chief Executive Officer from Indore Smart City is here, and he can share with you later that all the projects of our state which are eligible for earning carbon credits have been documented well, and we have started the cash inflow, the incentive has started flowing for so many of our projects which earn carbon credits from the international organization. if it may be it the CNG-driven vehicles or solid waste management or reduction of non-revenue water or e-buses or all other public transport initiatives. That has been a great success. Finally, environmental story cannot be complete without use of energy. Madhya Pradesh has the credit of the largest floating solar power plant coming up by this September in Omkareshwar. Madhya Pradesh had the credit of the largest solar power project, which is now not the largest, but when it was formed in the Riva solar project, it was the largest of the country. And the renewable power obligation, which of the solar power, which was mandated to be only about 4%, Madhya Pradesh today proudly can say that we have crossed 8 to 10% of that achievement, and we are moving further ahead. So the Sanchi is a very beautiful small city. It's a heritage city, UNESCO World Heritage City, and is the seat of a Buddhist temple. That city has been declared solar city in our country, which has zero carbon footprint from energy sector, and the entire energy is supplied by the solar. Finally, I would just dwell upon the environmental aspect and the crisis of urban mobility, and I firmly believe that the solution to urban mobility lies not in infrastructure and pumping in more money and in bringing more elevated corridors and underground metros, but it lies in proper planning. The proper urban planning of the residential mixes, the clusters, the height and the mandate of the building permissions, and well-designed scientific analysis of the future needs of the city will lead to effective urban mobility. Many times we only think as in the short term of infrastructural interventions for urban mobility, which do not help out. The more roads you create, the more cars will come in. The solution lies in proper urban public transport, and that can come from urban planning. We have taken baby steps towards that solution also. Indore and Bhopal, our two flagship cities, are reviewing their master plan now, the urban land use master plan, and we hope to bring in the most modern concepts of urban mobility into that, so that Madhya Pradesh maintains its leadership, which started with Swachh Bharat Mission and moved on to water, into the urban mobility and urban planning in the current next coming years. And with that, I end my presentation. I'll be very happy to take questions and discussions whenever the opportunity arises, or informally later on.
And now for several years, I think I met him in 2013 or 2014 the first time, and since then we have run into each other at various places. He is also the author of the 2019 report on Asia's urbanization on behalf of UNSCAP, and I'm sure that he will bring to bear some of his experiences in his presentation. Omar, over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mathur. And it's always a tough job to come in before lunch, so I'm going to try to keep this as interesting and dynamic and short as possible. I have been working in the UN system now for over 18 years, and when putting together this presentation, I had a little bit of deja vu because my first job in 2004 was working with UNDP on MDG localization. And then I look back at what we were doing in 2004, and it's like very relevant to the SDGs and what we are doing now in terms of the localization agenda, just different acronym. So my career has kind of come 180 in a way. So thank you so much for that invitation, and it's, again, privileged to share some of our work and to zoom out a little bit at the Asia-Pacific level. And again, as I mentioned this morning, our team advocates for national sustainable development policies within UNSCAP and countries in the region more broadly. So the challenge I was put today is to summarize multiple urban crisis and collective response to that for 53 countries in 10 minutes. So I'll try to do my best to communicate that. So I can't take credit for this cartoon, but it kind of resonated with me, and I think maybe with all of you in the audience from this morning, in terms of how myself and colleagues felt coming out of this pandemic. So the world is really facing a series of multiple and interlinked crises, and it's really a perfect storm that's testing the limits of our current development paradigms, from the health crisis to recession, and probably the most existential crisis of all, climate and biodiversity collapse, right? The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, impacts of the war on Ukraine, and a worsening climate crisis have negatively impacted the Asia-Pacific region's energy and food security, and also fiscal soundness. These multiple interlinked crises have plunged millions more people into poverty and reversed years of development gains. It's disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable people in the region, as food and energy price shocks and the resulting surge in inflation has worsened consumption inequalities and created a cost of living crisis. The fiscal position remains under greater stress than ever before, which is impeding the ability of governments to support vulnerable households and economies further from decline. And at the same time, the climatic and natural disasters continue to have a high toll on the most vulnerable groups, who often have the least ability to respond. So I want to focus a little bit in terms of how we see the SDGs as a blueprint kind of for our sustainable recovery, and not only for the shocks, but the previous presenter talked a little bit about these long-term development stresses that increase those vulnerabilities. So the region's improvements in access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services under Goal 11 has been set back, with millions of people lacking the ability to pay for electricity services and shouldering increased cost of energy. The crisis also has diverted investment needed to strengthen progress in renewable energy, which is quite concerning. Hunger and malnutrition, one goal that I'd like to point out, Goal 2, is on the rise. There's an estimated 425 people in the region undernourished, and more than 1 billion people moderately or severely food insecure. Under Goal 8, on decent work, the outlook for the region's economies remains quite mixed and uncertain. Labor markets in many countries continue to operate in crisis mode, with an incomplete recovery and lower real wages. With narrow fiscal space and high debt burdens, countries face widening financing gaps for achieving the SDGs and reversing a lasting impact on the region's development prospects. Other goals are also directly and indirectly implemented and impacted, rather, given the interlinked nature of the SDGs. So this is an important slide. So UNESCAP, we work very closely with national statistical organizations in the region, and we do the regional progress reporting on the SDGs based on that. So the bar graph you see on your left-hand side is the snapshot of SDG progress for the Asia-Pacific region in 2019, so when the pandemic was kicking off. And the bar chart on the right side is the latest data that we have for 2022. Now, in order for a goal to be on track to be met by 2030, the blue bar has to touch the vertical black bar. And what you'll see is that in 2019, only one goal for the entire region was on track to be met by 2030. That is Goal 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. But what is really worrying is that we are actually regressing behind 2015 levels in many of the environmental dimensions of the goals. For example, Goal 13 on climate action and Goal 12 on responsible consumption and production. As we emerge from the pandemic, you'll see that we are now no longer on track to meet any of the 17 SDG goals for the Asia-Pacific region, while we have made some progress, for example, in partnership for the goals. So cities and human settlements are where all of these development challenges come together in sharp relief. So what SDGs do you see in this picture? You can just call out. 11, why do you say 11? Right. Maybe SDG 5 on gender. I see some women's unpaid care work happening. SDG 11 also, you see some informally built structures. Maybe SDG 10 on inequality, you see some high rises in the background. I think you get the point, right? So basically in urban areas, you can connect all of the different SDGs. So this event really comes at an important time with multiple regional forums convening along the global review of SDG 11, which was mentioned by the lady in the audience, and the upcoming SDG Summit later this September in New York, and the second Habitat Assembly in June, where SDG localization is one of the main tracks. So when you go to the SDGs, we passionately believe that the localization agenda is crucial, but it's already happening in Asia Pacific. I mentioned in the morning, the first reason is that national governments can't get there alone. We needed them to agree on the agenda, but the implementation is on all levels of government and actors in society. The second one is that this is not a compliance agenda. Rather, it's a beautiful opportunity to use the SDGs and voluntary local and subnational reviews as a local and regional policy tool. And the third one is if we do not highlight the granularity of how local and regional governments are performing against the SDGs, we can't meet the targets by 2030. So there's a very strong measurement and subnational data component to this work. For the first one, we know that 65% or more of the SDG targets need to be met in or by local areas. During COVID-19, local and regional governments were really on the front line, support for social, economic measures for vulnerable groups. So for us, the pandemic really brought out clear that regardless of the level of decentralization in the country, there's a number of policies discharged at the local and regional level: housing, mobility, local economic development, waste management, sanitation. And it's equally clear how we move forward as a primarily urban society in building this resilient future. It's closely related to the SDGs. Most mayors and governors that I meet, it's not like they wake up every morning and say, my agenda is to implement the SDGs. In fact, in these challenging times, it might seem something a bit disconnected from everyday life, but a mayor or a governor that we often work with wakes up every morning and says, I want to fix the housing affordability issue. I want to fix the air quality issue. And many of those issues are really connected to the global transformations needed for the SDGs. On my second point on the compliance agenda, it's true that national governments are ultimately accountable. They have to say where they stand, and they report to the UN every year. The commitment is intergovernmental, and of course, local and regional governments are engaged in the implementation. But if you flip this around and see the SDGs and specifically voluntary local reviews as providing a comprehensive and holistic agenda for local and regional governments to rethink the way you design local policies more strategically, develop more sustainable plans, the way you have to prioritize budget for capital investments behind each of the SDGs. So this shift from compliance to formulating new plans and strategies or adapting existing ones to align better to the SDGs is really the way to go. Now, I'll go a little bit fast because I'm running out of time, but my last point is really on measurement. So in our view, there is a very big risk that we continue to report on the development progress and each of these 17 goals based on national averages. For those of us who work in local and regional policies, we know that sometimes the disparities within countries, within regions, even within city neighborhoods, can be greater when you're comparing countries internationally. For example, in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, data from UNICEF showed that the level of child malnutrition and stunting in its informal settlements was 3 times higher than in rural areas. So if we don't go forward in terms of the measurement agenda, the subnational statistics to help cities and regions know where they stand, you really can't advance the agenda for the SDGs. I will go a little bit faster. I'm being told to wrap up. But moving forward, SCAP, we work very closely with local and regional governments. We've developed regional guidelines for voluntary local reviews. We've applied them in 9 municipalities so far. Currently, we're supporting our first state-level review in West Java in Indonesia, Indonesia's biggest province, and also the Pacific's first voluntary local review in Suva City. And at the regional level, the SCAP Commission session is the apex legislative body for the UN and Asia Pacific. And this May, at our 79th session, we have a draft resolution entitled Advancing Regional Cooperation for Sustainable Urban Development and Localization of the SDGs. It's been submitted by the delegation of Malaysia for adoption. So if passed, this will constitute a significant scale-up of the support provided to member states and local authorities in the region and will be a key input for the Habitat Assembly. So I hope I inspired you a little bit today, but in case you wanted some more resources on how you can participate in this localization movement if you're not already engaged, those are up on the screen here. And much of the data and information that I took from this presentation is from this publication we launched on World Cities Day on October 30th last year, called Localizing the SDGs to Address Multiple Interlinked Crises. We really are going to be continuing this conversation this week to the 8th Asia-Pacific Urban Forum this October in Suwon, Republic of Korea, where we hope we will see all of you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Omar, for a somewhat detailed and yet concise presentation. Thank you very much. May I now request Mr. Rajiv Yadurvanshi, who is the Additional Chief Secretary, Delhi Administration, for his views on Delhi.
Good afternoon, everybody. So a little correction, I'm no longer in service. I retired on 31st January, but I'm still active on the subject of urbanization, which I started learning 25 years ago. I was posted in northeastern parts in Himalayas. There the problems of urban areas are different ball game altogether. We had a speaker earlier from Himachal, the mayor, who spoke about it. Then I came to Delhi, where the real urbanization and the issues started coming up, and I was hit by brickbats every day, Delhi's problems. Those were the times when I learned about the privatization, the unbundling of the power sector, and a regulator being put there. And it has had good stead for Delhi's power sector. And I think it would hold for any city that privatizing a utility like power, because basically from the finance point of view, it is a non-tax revenue. And as Finance Secretary, I've seen that you have whatever is your expenditure, you have to outweigh it with your cost. So better to privatize it, unbundle it, and put a regulator in place. So those were the times when it was done properly. Then the water supply and sewage disposal for Delhi, we put in water treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, got the help from Japanese under JICA, the technical know-how, electric crematoria, which is also an issue for India, where cremations do take place, and it is a healthy way of disposal of the dead bodies. Of course, the garbage was rising. We had huge bonds. By the time I learned and tried to handle them, I was posted out of this place. I went to Goa, and there I learned about urbanization in a different sphere. Goa's area is around 3,082 square kilometers. I'm telling you this because India has a mixed bag of various cities having different sizes in different states, in different geographical conditions, which is a learning experience for both cities inside India and all for the Southeast Asia countries, because I traveled intensively to the Southeast Asia countries and I found similar problems, and that helped me to think that what is a solution for India and for Southeast Asia is a different set game altogether, which of course we can have things to learn from Europe or maybe Japan or China or any US also, but what is our way for each city way has to be chalked out separately. So when I went to Goa, with an area of 3,000 odd square kilometers with a population of 12 lakhs at this, and more tourist population, how do you handle the area with a rolling terrain, which is not high mountains, but you still have a problem of brackish water, which is beautiful, but still you have a problem of the fresh water. There, a trend was that 50% of the area is urbanized and rest of the Goa is rural area. And I was secretary for urban development as well as for rural development and panchayats, looking after both. So it was this, Dr. Mathur had said, it's a rural-urban continuum. You just feel that the urban area is here. It is strictly not urban in the sense of Delhi or any other big metropolitan city. And it's not totally rural, and there's a semi-urban area in place. So there the problem was, how do you balance? So I was trying to learn my lessons in Delhi. I was thinking that, oh, let me see how to handle this way. But what was a solution for Delhi would not be a solution for Goa. So that is a takeaway point which I learned from hard realities. Delhi, at Goa, they were trying to put in a transport system. I was transport secretary also. So all these problems, handling at one way. So there they came up with a model that they wanted to put a monorail as a connectivity system. And there was a comfort level in people living in their homes and going to their workplaces, which was not more than 1 hour or 1.5 hours travel. In Delhi, I used to see the problem. People used to come from neighboring states after in Uttar Pradesh or Haryana, and even some parts of Rajasthan, daily traveling 2 hours, 2.5 hours days, one way, coming, working in Delhi and going back to their homes and sleeping. I don't know what is a success model, because if you're going, your bodies are tired while traveling from your home to workplace and back home, and then you just go back, sleep, and then again like a machine you are coming back. So this thing was not comprehensible by me. At that time when I was in Delhi, the Delhi metro system was being installed. And the problems I had looked at Delhi was the modal system of the bus transport was there, a ring rail was there, metro was not there, but there was a problem of modal exchange. How do you change the mode from one, if you're traveling by bus, there's no connectivity to the rail. And if you're coming by car, how do you change onto the rail, and then how do you go to reach your destination? So that means there was a planning which had failed or which had lost its relevance in terms of time, and you had to put in a rail-based system, a metro system, which was done a good job. Now when I went to Goa, the same thing I found, that they wanted to put a monorail system. Then learning from Delhi's experience, I talked to Mr. Sridharan in Delhi and said, because he put the monorail system and I was director of Konkan Railway Corporation. I said, let us put something in between. So the learning point was, Delhi, the rail is heavy rail. In Goa, a monorail system would not work, but a light rail would work. So this only needs a very intensive study. It's a very specialized field by itself, and nobody just who's handling the municipality subject from a view of like handling a funding of a municipality or working in a municipality, they would not know the solutions. So this has to be a learning experience, and a hand-holding is required. A very, very careful planning is required. These are long projects. So having learned that lesson, I found that rather than having a total urban solution, it is better to make people comfortable in their home in townships which are away from the highly urban areas like, of course, Delhi or Mumbai, etc., and make them people more comfortable in their work and their homes. As this is also my learning experience as time went by. So from Goa, I went to Pondicherry, which is on the east coast. There also it is a French town, Auroville city. And if you have visited Auroville, it's a very planned city like Chandigarh, etc. It has people from various countries living there as a living model for the rest of the nations, for the other countries also, to see how a harmonious living of people from various countries it is there. So very good urban model, but also there the learnings are entirely different, and could be learning for planning newer cities which are greenfield projects rather than existing cities and you retrofit into another thing. After that, I landed in Andamans and I put up the smartest smart city as a project, where Government of India's initiative was to put a smart city. So that smart city project, and Neeraj was also there in the ministry at that time, sent the whole process of discussion on the what is your long-term plan? Engage the people in the planning, particularly in the municipalities, because once they put a plan and put a corporate, rather than being a municipality, corporatize it. The projects which are there, then you have to fund those projects, because the funding is the biggest issue in the putting up infrastructure. So then having in an island territory, putting a smart city, I thought I had learned and I'd really achieved something which was more of, handling urban and rural together, and that is in ideal condition. After that, again, I came back to Delhi, and from which I had superannuated. Here the problems again were there. The garbage dumps had gone even up, and also there were issues of COVID hit. So Government of India, not the Government of India, but the Supreme Court ordered a committee under my chairmanship that you see how to reduce this garbage dump, which could be a parameter for the entire country also, and all state governments and National Green Tribunal took up the matter at a later date. So the garbage dumps, which are nearly 65 meters out high, they brought down in a certain way, and that would be a learning lesson for the other cities, etc. So the point which I'm saying is that, and lastly, one more point is that at that time COVID hit. When COVID hit, how to put the city into an organic whole, a disaster which is man-made, or how to handle it. Then there was a program of Government of India, like Central Public Grievances Monitoring Redressal System, CP-GRAM program. So the grievances of the people were put onto that, and all the things we were working online, like whatever we traveling time from homes to the workplaces, that got reduced. People were working from home, they felt more comfortable, and how to handle the crisis first, and later on that system stabilized. So these are the learnings which I have done. These are available in my PPT, which you can share. Time is short, already Signals is giving. So these are the things. My saying is that there is no single solution for everybody. What is my solution for Delhi would be different for Goa and for different. This is the takeaway from India. And what would be the linking of the cities? Like Government of India has got a twinning in the city program. So what could be the future way of solution is, what learnings we have done, we could share with the cities of the same sizes, of same populations in different geographical settings, and have the formal agreements, and with Government of India, and do the learning experience and share from each other and find our own way ahead. What is typical of the South Asia, that would be a way for the South Asia itself, which is different from the normal learning ways of, goals of, which are also important, sustainable development goals, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murugashri. Thank you very much.
Working in the space of disaster management and environment from past 29 years. And today I would just like to share few of our own experiences within the area of urban resilience and how we are trying to tackling the evolving crisis that is around the uncertainty of the climate. So the way I have structured my presentation is I would like to kind of speak about why we are talking about this issue, what we are doing, and what is the conclusion that as a group, how we can take this forward. So SEEDS is working for building resilient communities. So we work with various partners, including the local governments, even the national government. We work very closely with NDMA, NIDM in India. Even at the regional level, we are working closely with various UN agency, UNDP, UNDRR, on certain issues around the disaster risk reduction and the resilience. In terms of our mission, what we are trying to do is, the way we are seeing our role is a facilitator for a community for shocks and stresses which they are facing, and how we can solve that through facilitating some of the ideas, technology, and exchange. So that's what, as an organization, we are trying to do. These are the major areas of our work. We are focusing on building resilient communities, ownership-driven architecture. So we have been part of lots of reconstruction programs, both within India as well as within the South Asian region. The latest one was the Nepal earthquake, where we have worked in Gorkha and helped in reconstruction of more than 30,000 houses. The third one is the humanitarian response and relief, and we are also trying to see that how technology can be leveraged where the humanitarian response can be anticipatory. So rather than after an event, how you can prepare the community before an event. In terms of the climate change, these are few numbers. I think from the morning we have been hearing the numbers, but these are scary numbers in terms of how climate change is going to impact the communities across India. And the same scenario is there within the region, considering the 90% of the development is going to happen in the Asian region, and that too majorly within the cities. So in terms of the why, these are the numbers which we are talking about. In addition to this number, there is also increased number of climate migrants every year within various countries within Asia. And that is also very alarming, that how climate change is forcing people to migrate, and most of them, they migrate to the urban areas, which is putting in more pressure to the cities. So I would like to talk about 4 cases where we are working using various technology, but we are keeping the people at the center of the solution. So first is the Sunny Lives model, which is talking about the hyper-local risk information. So how you can utilize the artificial intelligence to identify the hyper-local risk information based on the hazard and the type of the roof, because the type of the roof gives a lots of information in terms of potential damage for various hazards. So how you can use this model and identify the hyperlocal risk information, and based on that, how you can work on various issues, be it response or resilience building. So this is a case where we have looked at one area within Delhi for the heat impact. As you can see, we have identified that which are the area which are going to which are going to experience higher heat because of the typology of their houses. And based on this, we have also given a specific advisory in the local language in that particular area. So you can use this model for such kind of, so this is one use case, but if you have to do a resilience building, you can identify those at-risk area and plan your interventions in those areas which will reduce the issues of the risk. The second is the how you can create informal urban citizen group which can tackle the issues of disasters and resilience building. So this is our experience working in East Delhi, where we have created this PDAP, which is a citizen-based forum which looks into various risk and resilience issues. So by Citizen Forum, we have been also able to reach out to youth, then the community action groups, as well as the construction workers and the local government and other key actors. So in a way, what we are trying to do is how citizens can be mobilized to take action on various risks which they are facing within those cities. These are some of the pictures of the citizens group in action. The other example is how the traditional knowledge of that particular area can also be utilized for some of the risk reduction issue. So this is a picture from Assam in Guwahati, how they are using this traditional man-made mounds to reduce the issue of water logging. Same way, the traditional way of building on stilt has also helped them to minimize the economic losses due to recurring flooding in the Assam region. This is an example of how data can help you identify the key areas as well as how you can institutionalize some of the solutions. So we have did the study of 2 flooding incidences in Chennai and identified that what are those areas which has been impacted. And surprisingly, what we learned that, so in 2015 we know that Chennai received more than 883% of the rainfall, and that has created more issues in the city. And these are the mapping which we have done based on those 2 incidences. Interestingly, what we also found out that after the 2005 flood, lots of citizen group has responded quickly. And same thing has also been repeated after the 2015 flood. So that also gives you an idea. If we can institutionalize some of this citizen-based response work, that can also be useful for building the resilience in that area. So, just to conclude my presentation, I think we, as a stakeholder, we have to look at the community participation more deeply in various aspects. And these are some of the areas where we can look at, because what we are looking at within urban areas is we have urban systems, we have vulnerable groups, and we have impacts of climate. And if you combine all three and work towards reducing the impact on the vulnerable groups, that will build the overall resilience within the urban areas. And these are some of the areas where we have seen lots of citizen-based initiatives, which can be promoted as part of the institutional mechanisms. So just to conclude, what I would like to suggest is, apart from the key pillars of urban resilience, if we can also add the community engagement as one of the pillar and try to find some of the good practices across various regions, that will also help all of us to realize the dream of resilient Asia going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very, very enlightening address. Rumi, I've been asked by the organizers if you can take 5 to 7 minutes at most. Yeah, right. Rumi is a JNU product. He did his PhD there, and we have known each other when he was.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. I would like to share some thoughts on the responses to urban challenges and the aspects that require further attention. And I would be covering 3 points only. The first one is on the urban planning. Second is about peri-urban areas. And the third is to do with municipal governance. Regarding urban planning, as you know very well, the master plan is an important instrument for guiding future urban growth in a planned manner. And almost in the entire world, this is a very popular practice of preparing a master plan and implementing it so that cities function in a proper manner. But in the case of India, there are still several urban centers, towns, where master plans are yet to be prepared. This means that such towns are growing in an unplanned and unorderly manner, which is not good for the citizens of those towns. Taking note of this, the Indian government concerned departments, namely the Town and Country Planning Organization, and in collaboration with the National Remote Sensing Center, they are working together to prepare master plans for as many as 500 cities in the country. This work is in progress. From what I learned from the website, about 135 such master plans have been prepared for different towns in the country. And the distinguishing feature of this initiative is that a geodatabase is created, and these master plans are prepared using GIS technologies, And in this process, there is a capacity building of the personnel who are engaged in preparing the master plan. But it needs to be reviewed. The quality of these master plans need to be reviewed. From an assessment of the Delhi master plan, the previous master plan for Delhi, which I undertook at the Observer Research Foundation where I work, I found that the plan is not responding properly to the various needs of the city and the citizens. And for this reason, the ongoing work needs to be evaluated from various points of view, from the point of view of safety, security, inclusion, etc. The upcoming master plan for Delhi, which is in the process of approval by the national government, it does address several of the concerns that were experienced in the previous plan. If it is implemented in a correct manner, in an effective manner, then it is quite possible that some of those adversities that we see in cities would be addressed. That's the first point about master plans. The second point, and this is a related issue, is the developments that are occurring in peri-urban areas of the country. Many populous cities are extending outwards, and there seems to be you might have seen an urban sprawl, a huge urban sprawl in some of the populous cities of India. Now, what is happening is that the sprawl is leading to changes in the character of peri-urban areas. Those peri-urban areas are undergoing a transformation. While there is nothing wrong, this activity is witnessed all over the world. There are many cities, global cities like Shanghai, which are huge. The urban sprawl is huge. If you see from the top, then it's a huge sprawl. But the issue since I've studied India and the conditions in peri-urban areas of India, the problem here is that such changes, by changes I mean that there is increasing population densities in such peri-urban areas. There are land use and occupational changes that are being witnessed. Built structures, a lot of built structures are coming up, and also there is a reduction in farmland. So these changes are negatively impacting the lives and livelihood of the farming community, which is not a very good indication of how future growth should occur. The third and final point is about the quality of municipal governance in the country. I see a lot of municipal functionaries present here, and I would like to say that although you know very well that these entities are elected bodies, and they are required to perform a wide range of functions, and also to keep the city in proper order. And I fully agree that a lot of work has been done in the past, especially in the recent past, about the various projects that have been implemented by the municipalities, corporations, councils, or Nagar Panchayats. But we are also, when you experience living in an urban area in India, then you experience a lot of problems also. They are visible, they are quite stark, and it makes you unhappy. You feel that you're leading an inferior quality of life. The examples that you just heard about of various indicators about the air quality, surface water bodies, green cover, biodiversity, etc., sanitation, infrastructure and services. I feel that there is a need to further strengthen these municipalities, because they are important actors in the governance process, They are responsible for bringing about a transformation, and three aspects on which work is needed is the building of skills, coming up with new technologies, and also revenue mobilization in innovative ways. So if nations in South Asia can come together to develop products or tools or technologies or things that are required which can be shared by various functionaries in all of these nations, then that would be very helpful in introducing new ideas and addressing the challenges of urbanization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rumi. Our last speaker is Dr. Rajshri Kamath. She comes from Bhopal and IT. She's a specialist in earthquake and flood-prone areas. She's a specialist in that one. Rajshri, please 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Very good afternoon to all of you. And I know everybody is just waiting for the lunch. So what I wanted to take, can you just start my presentation? I wanted to talk on the topics. Okay, before that presentation starts, in fact, I had worked in the Disaster Management Institute, Bhopal, in 2003, 4, 5, and that Disaster Management Institute happens to be the first disaster management institute to be established in India because of the Bhopal gas tragedy. And I'm a pass out of 1992 architecture. So believe me, when I had listened to the first lecture of training session of Disaster Management Institute, I had tears in my eyes, and that inspired me to work in this field. And I'm a faculty in MA and IT Bhopal, a senior faculty. But whatever I do, whatever duties and teaching I do, I'm keeping this work as a passion, and I'll continue afterwards. I've written around more than 50 research papers that include Q2 SCI papers and Scopus papers, and a lot of project work I have done. I've been teaching a lot of subjects in my institute on this topic, and also conducting expert lectures, because from my point of view, the subject is different. Just slide, change the slides. Content pe aa jao seedhe. Take a second. Okay, in fact, I wanted to talk in detail in 10 minutes on inclusive and resilient cities and evolution of crisis, inclusive and resilient cities in detail, then evolution of crisis, then relationship between the crisis and urban planning, which a lot of speakers had been putting a lot of stress on, because what we see, a lot of chaos that is there is the non-coordination between different things like transportation, land use planning, master planning in the urban areas. That is creating a lot of chaos. Then collecting urban response, then institutional setup in disaster management. And I'm very happy to tell you that I am the nodal officer for my institute with the NIDM. And recently I had been to the third session of NPDRR, and I literally met all the people from NDMA, NIDM, NDRF, SDMA, and whatnot, because I had the privilege of looking at the Disaster Management Act 2005. It was a bill, it was in my hands in 2003, 2004. I have the privilege of working on it. That is why I know that NDRF plays a very important role. NDRF has evolved. Crisis might have evolved, but India has evolved. Now we have to evolve at a much higher pace than the evolution of crisis. Now these are all the things which I wanted to discuss. I'm taking with the speed of air. Now what we want to have is a very proactive world. We all come from different parts of the world, and we have to protect the world, and we have a collective responsibility towards the crisis that is evolving. We have seen in COVID also, the COVID is a crisis, and through mutation it was evolving like anything. Now we have to give to our future generation, we have to teach a lot of things. We have very short number of books, textbooks, and we don't have anything in this field. So, sorry for bypassing all these things. I wanted to talk about all the control rooms and of various levels, SDMA, DDMA, and all. I'm straight away coming to the point that as I'm working in this field, I've recently written a book. So, planning model for earthquake and flood-prone towns. How to proceed with this particular topic if there are so many cities in the world, there are so many disasters that are existing. We can have one methodology. We can work out for that particular place, for particular disaster, taking this as an example. So you can see this book. I'm very happy to share with you. This is a paperback book which you can also read in detail, and what all I want to say is summed up in this book, and in future also I'm going to write many books on. I'm already into the project of Home Affairs that is going to produce a textbook, a very simple textbook on disaster management. I've also written a chapter in that. It is going to come out very recently. So the methodology, you can see, is very simple. This methodology can be utilized by for working out the crisis for any particular place. Okay, so there is a hazard factor in any place. We have the disaster history. It can be earthquake, it can be flood, it can be cyclone or anything. Then we have the base data. We can have it from the survey, any of the surveys or the population data, the demography data, or the land use, the existing land use data of any city. Then we have the elements at risk. All the population, all the wards, all the bridges, infrastructure, houses, that are the elements at risk. Then we have the damage assessment criteria. We have to have different type of damage assessment criterias. Suppose there is a cyclone, we have different damage assessment criteria. If there is an earthquake, we have different damage assessment criteria. If we have flood, we have different damage assessment criteria. Then we have damage assessment tool and data. And then for any city, we can develop a scenario. Why to wait for any disaster? We know already that Delhi is earthquake prone, this thing. We can have a scenario. What zone it is in and what intensity it can expect. And we can create scenario of how many houses will be damaged. Depending on the typology of the houses, depending on the construction type of the houses, we can easily have a scenario of population affected, infrastructure affected, and just everything. So by interpreting this disaster scenario on the maps, we can easily interpret it, and then we can do the analysis of these scenarios, and then on the existing land use maps and the disaster management plans, we can incorporate all these things and we can have an integrated master plan along with the DDMP. Just like after 2005 Disaster Management Act, we had amended our Nagar Tatha Gram Nivesh Adhiniyam. There are different sections. Before 2005-06, we had even the disaster word was not there in our Nagar Tatha Gram Nivesh Adhiniyam. After 2005 or 6 and 7, after the amendments, we have disaster prone areas. At least now in master plans, we have disaster prone areas, earthquake prone areas, cyclone prone areas, and then we can plan. Why to live in such areas without any protection and be in a chaos? We can easily avoid all these chaos. I'm being an architect urban planner. I have taught many students in this direction, and this is a methodology. There is a lot of work that we have to do. I had been associated with training and teaching and research with all stakeholders. We have to do a lot of work. We have to produce a lot of projects and books, and we have to work on almost each and every city in detail. So this you can see, and this is with Red Cross or with the engineers of the state or the national level. Then in the school, all the stakeholders have to be given training, and the training is designed as per them only. It's not same for all. Nothing is same for anybody. So this is ICS training also I have taken and I have given. I have been associated. Now I'm very happy to say that I'm teaching these students. This is the studio, or even traffic and transportation planning. We take disaster risk, urban flood. We have so many subjects. So it's not necessary that earthquake comes every now and then. The earthquake comes, thousands of earthquakes come. But do you know, do you have the knowledge? The future generations should be having that knowledge. You know, we won't be facing any crisis of that level. Maybe our future generations will face. Because for, suppose, centuries or within 10 years, we have some calamity, or in a century, we have a disaster. But preparedness is the key to it for all stakeholders. So you can see in first year, they are with the portfolio. In the final year, they are with the jobs. And suddenly, after 3 hours of my class, they surprised me on my birthday. So this online, and you can see pass outs like Anusha, like Ikansh, like Asta Kirar, like Monica, and all are working in AIILSG. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rajshri.
Thank you.
I just want to have a picture with the people on the dais, and Ravi sir, if you can come with my book, if possible.
Yes,
just a click.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Hansa ma'am who would like to say something.
Let me take few minutes, please. Now, before we go for our lunch, All India Institute Local Self-Government is having a National Fire Academy. And under National Fire Academy, we have multiple courses. And we have now settled ourselves into 4 different states, maybe 5 now, growing the Fire Management College. But I'm very much glad to see a woman talking about fire management. Ashri, congratulations. And let me tell you something else, dear. I have put a word to each municipal corporation in Gujarat, asking them to teach fire training to the schools. When a great fire happened in the school in Surat mayor is not here, but my Gujarat mayors are here, they are aware it was a big disaster. There was a tuition class on a building on the top, and it was very difficult to bring the children down, and we lost many souls. So let me say we can encourage this training program into schools and awareness to the community, and we can also touch hospitals. We have never thought about hospitals having this crisis management training program. So we'll train the nurses, the doctors, the staff, and also the patients. Let us do something under All India Institute Local Self-Government. Thank you for such a great speaker. Wish you all the best.
Do we have time for questions and answers? No. You mean we just break for lunch? Thank you all. Thank you for your patience. It's 2:10.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, sir. We have a felicitation ceremony now.
Thanks to all the... Omar, where are you? I know he's very hungry. He is very hungry. But thank you all very much. And thanks for your patience.
Speakers, please be here. We have a felicitation ceremony now. Just 2 minutes and then we can head for the lunch, everybody. Okay, Mr. Khurshid Malik, Senior Advisor, J&K Chapter, is here with us or not? Then, all right. I'll request him to felicitate Mr. Om Prakash Mathur. DP Tiwari.
Sir, please. Sir, please. Sir.
Ravi sir can felicitate Mr. Omar Siddiqui. Mr. R.K.S. Yadav, Director of Training, please come forward and felicitate Mr. V.D. Joshi. Sayan Acharji, Project Manager. Please felicitate Dr. Ladies and gentlemen, I know everybody would like to head for the lunch, but let's put our hands together for such an insightful 3 o'clock, we will see you all gathered back in the ballroom.